Hello and welcome back to Indus News with me, Usman Lone. Well, we begin this bulletin with our top story, and that's in Afghanistan, where a bomb explosion has killed 29 people in a mosque in eastern Nangarhar province during Friday prayers. Officials said over 100 people were wounded in the attack. The provincial government said the roof of the mosque collapsed after the explosion. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. The United Nations says more civilians were killed in Afghanistan during the past quarter than any other three-month period since the start of the war. In a report, the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said over 1,100 civilians were killed from July to September. The UN report said over 2,500 civilians were killed and over 5,500 were wounded so far this year. The report says the US-led coalition and Afghan security forces are responsible for 62% of all casualties. Calling the violence totally unacceptable, the UN's Afghan envoy Tadamichi Yamamoto stressed the need for an immediate ceasefire. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says there are no ongoing clashes in northeastern Syria. He was speaking to the media in Istanbul and said Turkish troops will not leave the region under the deal with the United States. He said US and Turkish officials will remain in contact to implement the agreement. Earlier, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said sporadic clashes between Turkish forces and Kurdish fighters are ongoing despite the truce. It said there have been artillery strikes in the town of Ras Al Ain. Washington and Ankara have agreed to a ceasefire after a meeting between President Erdogan and US Vice President Mike Pence. Under the agreement, Turkey stalled its operation for 5 days to allow the withdrawal of Kurdish forces. The US announced it will withdraw sanctions against Ankara once the military operation ends. Libya has launched a complaint with Moscow against Russian mercenaries who fight in the Tripoli war alongside Haftar's forces. In an interview, Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj said Libyan forces captured belongings of Russian men during a raid on the front line. He said his government trusts Moscow's role in the Libya stability, but al-Sarraj also denied that there are any mercenaries fighting alongside Libyan army forces. Meanwhile, China has vowed to probe the use of its drones by Haftar's forces in Libya. This came after the Libyan Foreign Ministry called for an investigation. In Brussels, EU leaders have failed to reach an agreement on allowing Albania and North Macedonia to start talks to join the bloc. The deadlock comes days after EU ministers hit a similar impasse at talks in Luxembourg. Senior EU leaders and all member states except France believe North Macedonia has made sufficient efforts for talks to start. Albania, by contrast, has less support. The Netherlands, Denmark and France have voiced serious reservations about the progress it's made on reforms. Almost 100 people have been injured after police fired rubber-coated bullets at protesters demanding freedom and the release of jail leaders. Catalan separatists burnt police barricades in Barcelona and other cities. Throwing Molotov cocktails at the police, hundreds of protesters set roadblocks and rubbish containers on fire in Barcelona. Rescue services said 58 people have been injured in Barcelona, while another 38 sustained injuries in the Catalan cities. Police in Catalonia have detained 97 protesters since Monday. Protests were triggered after a court jailed 9 of their leaders over a failed independence bid in 2017. Now, 2 Palestinians have been wounded after Israeli forces fired rubber bullets on unarmed protesters in Ramallah city. Palestinians have taken to the streets in protest against the Israeli establishment of a new settlement outpost on Turmus Aya land. Israeli occupation forces fired rubber bullets after failing to disperse protesters with tear gas. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have detained 9 Palestinians during multiple overnight raids across the West Bank. None of the soldiers were injured in the collision. Well, Palestinians live in fear as Israeli forces could bomb them at any time under the guise of fighting terrorism. One child survivor of an Israeli airstrike on Gaza 5 years ago dreams of having superpowers, and it's his way of coping with the trauma of living under Israeli occupation. More in this report.
Israel's war crimes in Palestinian territory have taken a lot from thousands of children, but the survivors' stories don't finish with bombs and bullets. Yamin, just 3 years old at the time, and his baby sister survived. His back is still scarred and his left forearm remains deformed. The caretaker of both children still remembers the horrible incident.
On 29th July 2014, a massacre of my husband's family occurred. The massacre took the lives of 18 people, mostly women and children, especially 8 children. Only 2, Guyana and Yamin, emerged from the rubble that day.
But Yamin still has hope for the future and wants to be a policeman or even a superhero like Spider-Man.
I want to play ball, or when I grow up, I want to become a policeman. I wish I were Spider-Man and I had superpowers.
Founder of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Raji Sourani has demanded Israel to open a war crimes investigation into the incident. But after 5 years, he still has not got any answer.
We asked them to investigate about the war crime and to find out what had happened. And it's our right, it's the right of the victims or their relatives, or even Yamin, this young boy, to know why he lost 19 of his family members, including his father and mother.
Israel is still committing war crimes in Palestinian territories. Meanwhile, Jewish settlements in the West Bank and land seizures are making the two-state solution into a distant dream.
2 foreign workers in Lebanon have choked to death from smoke during ongoing protests against government taxes. Dense smoke engulfed the demonstrations after a symbolic fire spread to a building near the major protests in Beirut. State media reports the death toll could rise as rescuers are trying to pull bodies out of the blaze. Thousands have taken to the streets across Lebanon against the government's plans to impose new taxes amid an economic crisis. Police fired tear gas as protesters blocked roads, prompting heavy deployment of security forces. In Yemen, the United Nations say 388 civilians have been killed or injured due to the conflict in September. It said this has been the deadliest month for civilians so far this year. During a Security Council meeting, UN humanitarian chief Mark Lowcock said only 250 agencies are working for over 12 million people stuck in the war. He called for a nationwide ceasefire under international humanitarian law to protect civilians. Last week, airstrikes destroyed a UN-supported water system that provided for 12,000 people. Pakistan says India is not lifting its lockdown from occupied Kashmir because it faces a severe backlash. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the moment the siege is lifted, there'll be a bloodbath. In a series of tweets, Khan said oppression and gagging are the only way India is treating the people of occupied Kashmir. He said India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi couldn't annex occupied Kashmir even with 1 million occupying forces. Khan debunked Modi's narrative, saying India doesn't need 1 million troops to fight terrorism, but to terrorize 8 million Kashmiris. New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout has now entered its 75th day. Despite India's aggressive push, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, has decided not to put Pakistan on its blacklist. Announcing the decision in its meeting in Pakistan, the FATF praised steps taken by Pakistan against terrorism and money laundering. Pakistan will remain on the grey list until February 2020. Muslim political parties in the Ayodhya Babri Mosque case have rejected a proposal for settlement of the decades-old dispute. The proposal leaked to the media on Thursday said Muslims would surrender their claim over the mosque in favour of a temple. The proposal, drafted by the Indian Waqf Board, was part of a mediation effort under the aegis of the Indian Supreme Court. In the statement, the Muslim appellants said they do not accept the procedure by which the mediation has taken place. Muslim Party's lawyer Ijaz Maqbool raised questions regarding the recent practices of the mediation committee. He also took issue with the manner in which the withdrawal of claims has been suggested as a compromise. Now, Britain's Prince William and his wife Kate Middleton have departed after concluding a 5-day visit to Pakistan. The British High Commissioner and Pakistani officials saw them set off at the Noor Khan airbase in Rawalpindi. Earlier, Prince William said Pakistanis have lost many lives in the war against terrorism and their sacrifices must be acknowledged. He was speaking to journalists at the Army Canine Centre in Islamabad. The royal couple visited Lahore, Islamabad and Chitral during their stay in Pakistan. It was the first royal trip to the country in over a decade. Well, we'll be back with more stories from around the world right after this short break. Hello, welcome back. Now, as the debate over France's hijab ban intensifies, President Emmanuel Macron says Muslims should not be stigmatized, nor Islam linked with terrorism. He was speaking on the sidelines of the Franco-German summit in Toulouse, and Macron called for unity among all French citizens. The statement came after a far-right parliamentarian asked a mother volunteering on a school trip to remove her headscarf. The issue ignited a national debate, and it caused outrage against MP Julien Oudoul when he posted a video confronting the woman on social media. In Mexico, heavily armed fighters have freed drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's son after a dramatic gunfight with the National Guard. Mexico's Security Minister Alfonso Durazo said the National Guard patrol came under attack from within a house in the city. Durazo said gangsters had set up roadblocks and were unleashing heavy automatic gunfire at them. The police were successful in detaining Guzman, but the decision was withdrawn to restore peace in the city. El Chapo led the Sinaloa cartel for decades, escaping from prison twice before being arrested and extradited to the United States. New Zealand will start armed police patrols in part of the country to prevent attacks like the Christchurch terror attack. Police Commissioner said the mosque attack in March that killed 51 Muslim worshippers has changed the way the police operate. Bush said police must ensure that people are enabled to practice their religion without fear. He said the armed response teams will roll out in Auckland, Waikato and Canterbury on October 28th on a 6-month trial. They'll be routinely armed, equipped and ready to support frontline police officers at incidents that require enhanced tactical capabilities. The police commissioner said there was no immediate threat. Now in Hong Kong, a murder suspect who prompted the extradition bill that sparked unrest has decided to turn himself in to Taiwan authorities. Chang Tong Kai, who's 20 years old, has been serving time in Hong Kong for money laundering and will be released next Wednesday. An Anglican priest who visited the suspect in jail says Chan hopes the move will calm months of chaos. Chan was jailed last year over money laundering charges and murder. He is wanted in Taiwan for allegedly killing his pregnant girlfriend in Taipei last year. China has sent a new communications technology experimental satellite into the orbit from the Zhejiang Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan province. A satellite launched by a Long March 3B carrier rocket will be used for multi-band and high-speed communication. The satellite and the carrier rocket were developed by the China Academy of Space Technology. The China Aerospace Corporation collaborated with the Academy to blast off the satellite. It's 315th mission of the Long March rocket series. Now, Japan's 13-year-old Prince Hisahito's ascension to throne is being eyed as the kingdom hasn't produced any imperial males since 1965. Now, some experts and media are wondering whether Hisahito is being properly groomed for his future role. More in this report.
Under the post-war constitution, Japan's emperor has no political authority and is designated as the symbol of unity between people and state. It was only after emperor produced a male heir after his daughter in 2006 were concerns of renewing laws to include female succession removed.
The present government is not considering to establish a female imperial branch, or much less expand the right of succession to female line member. The government wants to put off the debate to discuss the issue of succession as much as possible.
In 2017, the parliament adopted a non-binding resolution asking the government to consider succession laws. But the law so far remains unaltered in favor of Prince Hisahito. Now, some experts and media are wondering whether Hisahito is being properly groomed for his future role, as Emperor Akito is nothing like his father.
It is important to have him, Prince Hisahito, realize that he is in a position to inherit the throne in the future from an early age. And we need an education for him, to have a first-hand experience, to feel and receive the expectation from the Japanese people.
Changes to the law are anathema to conservatives backing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Some people, including Princess Iko, believe that sanctity of customs should be kept and succession passed on to a male heir.
Now, on the north coast of South America, a Greenpeace research ship is on a mission to explore a new marine off the coast of Guyana. A team of French scientists has been working to identify the Amazon reef's diverse marine life, as well as making a case to keep the area from fossil fuel forages. More in this report.
Off the coast of French Guyana lies one of the world's largest coral reefs, only recently discovered. The Esperanza, part of Greenpeace's fleet, has come to explore this unique and extensive ecosystem. On board, scientists scan the waves from sunrise to sunset. They carefully record all the species they sight in this area rich with marine life.
We have an idea of how many species we have, of the diversity, but we have very little information on their habits, their migrations.
Biologists spot a school of whales in the middle of a hunt, and within minutes the Zodiac is being launched under the watchful eye of the captain. Between the tuna and sharks, scientists observe the bride's whale for the first time in this area. A rare species, they grow up to 16 meters long. This is proof for these naturalists that the area is far from being an oceanic desert.
If they feed here, it is because they are important areas for the survival of species. So inevitably, if there are too many disturbances, they will have to leave these areas, and it is not easy for them to find the same conditions in other areas.
The word survival might sound strong, but the threat from fossil fuel foragers is very real. It's not just the reef which would suffer in the event of an oil spill. On land, mangrove forests stretch all along Guyana's coast, serving as crucial fish nurseries as well as absorbing carbon from the atmosphere.
In case of oil pollution, we could see oil pellets entering this mangrove. Bear in mind that this mangrove is still the breeding location for our fish.
For Guyanese fishermen, fossil fuel companies represent a chance to renew their obsolete equipment. From its oceans to its forests, Guyana is rich in natural resources, but the questions of whether they should be exploited divides opinion in the capital, Cayenne. The fragility of the Amazon reef underlines the urgency of reaching an international agreement. Experts on board Esperanza hope their findings will convince decision makers to sign an ambitious treaty to protect the oceans.
Now let's take the business news. And the United States has imposed tariffs on a record $7.5 billion worth of European goods. Washington imposed the duties despite France's warning that it will retaliate. The duties were levied after the US won a landmark case at the World Trade Organization over the EU's unfair subsidies towards Airbus. In the line of fire are civilian aircraft from Britain, France, Germany and Spain. But the tariffs also target consumer products like French and Scottish alcoholic beverages. France's Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire said the tariffs will have very negative consequences both from an economic and political point of view. Facebook plans to launch its Libra cryptocurrency, and it's facing a new hurdle at the joint annual meeting of the World Bank and IMF. The G7 nations said such stable coins should not be allowed to launch until the profound international risks they pose are addressed. Apart from this, a number of key issues were discussed, such as trade and sustainable development. On the sidelines of the IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said she is encouraged by news of a tentative trade deal reached by Washington and Beijing. The annual meeting brings together finance and political leaders from all over the world. Well, it's a slightly cooler 23 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from the news, and that's all from me and the team here in Lahore. But we'll be back at the top of the hour with the headlines. Bye-bye.